Good evening from New York State Parks. We will begin momentarily. Thanks for your patience. Good evening, everyone. My name is Paige Barnum. I'm coming to you here from Albany. I'm a senior planner with New York State Parks, and we want to welcome you to our John J. Homestead State Historic Site public meeting tonight to talk about a very exciting project about our historic building restoration that our agency will be pursuing. A few housekeeping rules for this evening. So everyone is automatically muted upon entering the event tonight. We are accepting Q&A in the box at any point in time. If you would like to enable closed captions, there's a button in the bottom left corner of your WebEx screen with two little CCs on it that you can click to activate captioning. The Q&A box again is in the bottom right corner. There is a chat button featured, however, it has been disabled. And last but not least, there is an option to leave the event, the big red button at the center, if you need to leave us early tonight, but we are also recording tonight's event. So we expect to have the recording up here a few days after the event if you need to catch up with us. So with that, we will run over next a brief agenda for tonight's events. Introductions will follow my spiel here with your agenda. We will move through the historic preservation context and then into the real meat of tonight's presentation, the goals and objectives of the project at John Shea Homestead, talking about the interpretive plans we have, the historic restoration project, a project timeline, and finally, question and answer. We want to thank everyone that submitted questions in advance of tonight's session. We've got some responses to those queued up, and we are also taking Q&A live tonight. So with that, we will move to our introduction page. So online from State Parks with us tonight, you'll see a couple faces pop up as we move through these introductions. We have Bevan Collins, who is the Deputy Commissioner for Capital with New York State Parks. We have Daniel. Hi, Bevan. We have Daniel McKay, Deputy Commissioner for Historic Preservation. We have Linda Cooper, the Regional Director for the Taconic New York State Parks region. We have Heather Iannucci, the Historic Site Director for John J. Homestead. We also have with us tonight Garrett Jobson, who is the Hudson Valley Capital Facilities District Manager for our agency. You will also be hearing tonight from Amanda Tucker, who is our project manager for this effort. Lydia Miller, was also supporting Amanda in this project. Daniel Lewis is on the call. He is the environmental analyst who addresses seeker matters for this project. Supporting me tonight for planning staff is Tana Bigelow. And last but not least, we have Caroline McGill, who's the president of the Friends of John J. Homestead. So with that, I will turn it over to Daniel McKay to more formally welcome you to tonight's presentation.
Paige, thank you. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for making time on this early June date. The days are lengthening when we have a chance to be out later. I know being inside for video conferences and such may not be a first level interest, but we appreciate your effort to attend and participate this meeting. We appreciate your interest in the investments that our state agency is planning in this for this site. The team that Paige just introduced really represents all critical levels of the agency for a project of this scope and this intensity and this impact. And so that includes members of the executive staff, that's Bevan and myself. It includes members of the capital team, which is will be managing this project, already is managing this project as it moves through concept and development and soon to bid. It includes regional leadership, Linda Cooper, our site leadership, Heather Iannucci, and critical support staff in the planning office, in the environmental bureau. And so this is the team, or this is critical representation of the full scope of the team that Parks brings to a project of this scope, this magnitude, and this impact. So We're looking forward to making this presentation this evening. We know there's significant community interest. We have been working closely with friends of John J. Homestead under the leadership of Caroline McGill, who is here on the call with us, and I'll introduce shortly, with neighbors who have been critically engaged in recent months, much informing the project to a wonderful extent. And then longstanding partners at the site, the garden groups and others that have been so involved in making great use of this site over the years. The investment that we are planning at John J. Homestead, specifically focused in this iteration on the Bedford House with some related project components, will be the largest single investment in a state historic site in the agency's history. It follows a transformative investment at Phillips Manor Hall in Yonkers. If you have not been back to Phillips Manor Hall, if you've never been to Phillips Manor Hall in Yonkers, that was the previous record holder. That was a site that had previously received the largest single investment in a state historic site. It was fundamentally transformed. The building was restored, 2,800 square feet of new exhibit space, and a demonstrably upgraded exhibit taken from the perspective of our whole history, not just looking at the Phillips family, who really had served as the figureheads of previous interpretation of that site, but looking at the tenant farmers and the enslaved and the women on that property and how they informed the legacy of that property itself, and the legacy of the Phillips family generally. So we are looking to achieving similar results at John Jay, a transformative investment that will restore the house to full glory and offer us an extraordinary opportunity to begin reinterpreting the site from a more holistic, more inclusive perspective. That in the context of a particular site, that is really the mission of the State Historic Preservation Office, the Division for Historic Preservation, for which I oversee. The responsibilities for investment in our state historic assets are part of the state's comprehensive plan for historic preservation. The mission for the New York State Division for Historic Preservation is to create meaningful connections to the dynamic history of the state and for all residents and visitors. And our commitment is to protect historic and cultural resources, both those which are in our direct portfolio, and to encourage the public, to homeowners and businesses alike, to invest in the historic assets that they manage. And we are nation leading in terms of our impacts. The most National Register listings of any state in the country, the highest use of the federal and state rehabilitation tax credit programs, the most aggressive historic homeownership tax credit program, and it's a dynamic piece of the agency. We might be last in the name, but we feel like we certainly treat our mission for New York State as primary. The division strives to raise awareness of the value of historic places for future generations and to expand the complex narratives in order to tell a more comprehensive story that represents the diversity of the state's people, both past and present. And that is the opportunity with this investment. That is what we will achieve with this investment in Bedford House and the grounds of J. Homestead. This significant restoration will breathe renewed life into the historic Bedford House, which is obviously the centerpiece of the 62-acre property. We've been in a planning phase for several years, and had gone out to bid with an initial construction plan, which certainly focused on Bedford House, but included some other components just over a year ago. And in reaction to highly variable construction costs identified during an initial bid process that concluded in the fall of 2024, we realized that we were not going to be able to afford the original vision. And so the scope of this project has been revised to address some of the realities of cost and materials and tariffs and other issues. And so it has been revised to focus fully and holistically on the centerpiece of the property, Bedford house. And it is a planned $30 million investment in the property. It is going to be, as I said before, the largest single investment in a state historic site ever made by the agency. And it will prepare the site to attract renewed visitorship during 2 commemorative periods. First of all, we have just entered into the 8-year commemoration of the Revolutionary War period in New York State, which is being commemorated 2024 through 2032. And I think equally opportune and equally important for this property is 2 upcoming commemorations that have their commemorative year in 2027. And one that year marks the 400th anniversary of the arrival of the first enslaved Africans in what became New York State. And it marks the 200th commemoration of the 1827 manumission, end of enslavement. And so 2027 will be which is a date that occurs within the Revolutionary War commemorative period. We'll be commemorating both a commemorative period that we are calling enslavement to freedom. And the abolition story of the J. Homestead is just as important as the story of Jay as founding father and leader in the colonial period. So we are making this investment so that this site is positioned as a centerpiece in the state historic site system for those 2 commemorative periods. And we think you'll be pleased with the plans we are presenting. Over the course of rescoping this project since 2024, we have welcomed new input from the Friends of J. Homestead and immediate neighbors, and we appreciate the engagement, the support, the encouragement, the suggestions that they have provided to us. They have been critical to bringing this presentation to this public presentation stage. So in acknowledgement of that, I want to introduce Caroline McGill. She is the board chair of Friends of John J. Homestead.
Wonderful. Daniel, thank you for that lovely introduction. And thank you to all those on the call webinar for joining us this evening. I'm Caroline McGill, president of the Friends of John J. Homestead. If we could move on to the next slide, we're a nonprofit organization that has worked alongside New York State for nearly 50 years to preserve and interpret this remarkable site. In fact, our roots stretch back even further. We were originally founded as the John J. Homestead Association, which helped advocate for New York's acquisition of the property in the 50s, and owe a debt of gratitude to the neighborhood and the neighbors. And it's been a continuous part of our values and mission to be a bridge between New York State and our neighbors. Our mission is threefold. It is rooted in education, preservation, and civic engagement. The first part of this is to increase public appreciation and awareness of our nation's founding era, our region's rich history, and John Jay's enduring contributions, which include many stories that are well known and many stories that are lesser known, not just of Jay, but of the many people whose lives touched this magnificent property. Our second purpose is to encourage educational and recreational use of the John J. Homestead site. And the third is to supplement the work of New York State through private fundraising, volunteer support, and stewardship of the site's preservation, restoration, and interpretation. So later in the program, I'll share a brief overview of the Friends' current priorities. But for now, I'll turn it over to Amanda to walk us through the transformation of the Bedford House.
Thanks, Caroline. So the main objectives of this project moving forward, first and foremost, as Daniel mentioned, is to reopen Bedford House. Many of you know, I think Bedford House has been closed to the public for 5 years at this point, first due to COVID, and then for a planned fire suppression installation project. And then this project sort of developed. So our first goal is to get the house reopened to the public, have it become the gem that it once was. And in order to do that, we need to address some significant issues that sort of are affecting the integrity of the structure itself, the exterior envelope, making sure the building is weather tight. A primary goal is to preserve as much historic fabric as possible, restoring the interior of the house to that 1820s sort of era that we're looking to interpret, and then update the Bedford house to allow for accessibility into the first and second floor of the house, something that we really have never had before. Enriching the visitor's experience, we're looking to expand our tour with enhanced interpretation, as well as improve the visitor orientation for the site itself. We're hoping to enhance the wayfinding on the site as well. And in order to achieve that, we have a really great consultant design team. Our architectural consultants for the project are Beyer, Blinder, Bell, who have a really great background with planning and restoration projects. We also have Landmark Facilities Group, who's our mechanical, electrical, and plumbing engineer on board. They also have a great deal of experience with retrofitting historic structures. We have a landscape designer, Roadside and Harwell. Again, a lot of experience on historic sites. Clough Harbor and Associates is our site civil engineer, and Thornton Tomasetti is our structural engineer, with a large background in structural revitalization of historic structures with the goal of minimizing impacts to historic fabric. So we're really excited to have this team on board. So again, just to give you a little bit of a reference in terms of where we're focusing the project, for those of you not familiar with the site itself, the John Jay House is kind of located here on the western edge of the site, sort of the western edge of the historic core. And now I'm going to kind of walk you through the scope of what we're planning for the house itself. Like I said before, enhanced accessibility throughout and around the site. We are looking to provide ramps that connect different areas of the site. As many of you may know, the building itself is kind of built over various building campaigns at different height levels. So getting a wheelchair or having an accessible way to access those different areas can be tricky. We are looking to add a mechanical lift to the front porch to allow accessibility into the front of the house itself. We will be adding a limited use elevator that accesses the first and second floor of the house, a new egress stair in that rear newer 1904 addition, upgrades to the ballroom ramp, as well as a ramp that enters into the ballroom from that west porch. We are making major improvements to our restrooms. What's there will be gone and completely redone into gender neutral restrooms for the site to support the ballroom. And also a major historic restoration. So kind of working from the outside in, we are looking to open or reopen some historic spaces into the site itself. The 1820 kitchen, the man's room, and Heather will speak a lot more about this later, the cook's room, the pantry. We're also looking at reinstating some historic components of the house that perhaps have been lost over time, the historic sidelights on the front and rear entrances. We're looking at removing some non-sensitive historic details that have been added over time, the chair rails that are in the parlors and the main hall, the dining rooms. We're also looking at reinstating the historic 1820s fireplace mantles that we know were there when Jay lived there. And then, of course, with the support of new historic finishes from the Friends of John Jay Homestead, will be located in all of the areas denoted by a hatch. And that will include floor coverings and wall coverings. Moving on to the second floor, again, the accessibility with the elevator and the stair up to that level. And the historic restoration of two nursery rooms and a hall that connects those areas, as well as reinstating the original east-facing window in John Jay's bedroom that he himself referenced in a letter, which is how we know that that room is actually John Jay's. And as well as new historic finishes on this level as well. As far as the basement scope, we're looking to, again, the new stair will go all the way down to this level, and the Discovery Kitchen, I'm sure many of you are familiar with. It's a room that's kind of a hands-on space, was previously previously located here is planning on being removed to this location. So we can still have that space for interpretation with a little bit of easier access. In terms of the exterior of the house, again, the primary goal is the house will be whole at the end. We know that there are issues with roof leaks, water infiltration into the building, so we will be replacing all of the roofs, including all of the flashings. We will be doing a major window and storm window restoration, fixing repairs, fixing broken glass, and really taking a look at all the storm windows to make sure that they are all good. Masonry and cleaning and repointing. Again, water infiltration is a primary goal and objective here, including the chimneys. And then doing a lot of work to the exterior siding and other wood trims and windowsills, fixing any cracks or rot, and painting everything. So at the end of this project, the house will really look like a true gem of a building. We are also planning on making improvements to the electrical system. We do know that there's issues right now with brownouts, blackouts on site. We do think that the building is kind of maxing out its capacity, its current capacity. So we are hoping to provide new 3-phase electrical power coming up from J Street to feed Bedford House. The rest of the electrical is planned to remain as is. The brown lines that you see here are the existing overhead single-phase power that will remain, and the more beige lines are the existing underground single-phase power, again, that will remain. Another big issue that we've come across as we've been working with this project is the occurrence of mold. And so we are working with our designers to come up with a system that will really help offset and prevent further growth of mold in the building itself. We are doing a major overhaul of the existing mechanical system to improve infiltration, to provide duct cleaning throughout the entire building. We are looking to add 3rd floor heating and cooling to supplement the heating on the 2nd floor space. We do know that the existing system is undersized for the needs of the building. This is a 14,000 plus square foot building, and so there's quite a load that's required to heat and cool this building. So in order to do that, we are looking to add additional supply and returns into the historic core and the ballroom, carefully considering the locations of registers and grills so as not to disrupt historic fabric and visual integrity. We are looking to replace the chiller and add new boilers as well, and we will be adding dehumidification to the system. And then I'm going to turn it over to Daniel to talk about the Our Whole History initiative.
Amanda, thank you. Great overview and great details from you on the house. So I think the opportunity, the opportunity of investing in the house is really an opportunity, very specifically an opportunity to bring the Our Whole History program initiative that the agency has made a commitment to the house and to this property. What Our Whole History is about, it is an initiative that seeks to reveal and share historically undertold stories of ordinary and extraordinary people across New York State, and in this case at this site specifically, by providing multiple perspectives on historic places and events and the people who inform them. New York State historic sites and parks encourage the general public to take a deeper look at our state's history, learn more about the people who got us where we are today, and explore the experiences of all people. We have 35 sites within our historic site system. They each have the capability of telling a rich and deeply authentic story. And this house and this property is certainly one of those. And this investment, I think, will very much encourage those stories to be elevated. We have a very qualified site staff that has been doing strong interpretive work, and this is really the final encouragement to take that work to the next level. I think the opportunity to interpret the kitchen space, the opportunity to interpret the children's spaces, the opportunity to place the manumitted servants in this house and elevate their stories, complex as they are. Those are, I think, invigorating, are going to invigorate attendance and engagement with both a local and national public. And this story, this house and this property have additional stories to tell for all the stories that already can be told here. This investment in Bedford House will elevate that even further. So the person who is so very responsible for carrying out that mission at the site level is Heather Iannucci, our site director, and she will be handling the next part of the presentation. Thank you, Heather.
Thank you, Daniel. So here on the ground floor, first floor of Bedford House, we are adding interpretive spaces that previously housed collection, storage, and administrative functions. These spaces are in the blue color that you see on your screen. And they are spaces which had been occupied by free and enslaved Black people and white servants that will better allow us to include that our whole history piece that Daniel was just discussing. Those spaces include a cook's room, the manservant's room, the 1820s kitchen, a provisioning pantry, as well as a service hall that brought farm hands and the farm manager to John Jay's office when they were doing business with him related to the farm. Can you advance to the next slide, please? Here again, on the second floor, you see additional new spaces coming online, including spaces that were occupied by children, such as the day and night nursery. We have thousands of school-age children to our Bedford House each year. By bringing these spaces online, it will allow those visitors to see themselves in those spaces, better enabling them to make meaningful connections to our past. Next slide, please. Here in the basement, as Amanda indicated, we are going to maintain our Discovery Kitchen. That allows for independent exploration of themes centered around open hearth cooking and handicrafts, reflecting labor which would have been done by free and enslaved Black people and white servants. In addition to the specific items highlighted on this slide and my previous two slides, we are broadening the stories told in the Historic House Museum of women and their societal roles. We've planned for dialogic tours and programming on immigration, women's issues, and other topics of today that have roots in our past. We are also committed to telling all of our stories in a more inclusive and accessible manner by including a sensory-friendly discovery center for neurodivergent younger audience, an immersive parlor in the Historic House Museum for all neurodivergent audiences, tactile learners, and people with vision impairments. Our exhibits are going to include bilingual exhibit panels, multilingual gallery tours, and Braille gallery guides. We also plan a Spanish language tour with some differentiated content to focus on enduring issues such as freedom. We are looking to bring ASL tours of the Historic House Museum online, early hours for neurodivergent audiences, historic house tours with tactile experiences for visitors with vision impairments. And again, I'd like to emphasize that Bedford House will be fully ADA accessible, which is an amazing accomplishment for us. To speak a little bit more about what the interiors of the spaces will look like in Bedford House, I'm going to turn back over to Caroline.
Thank you, Heather. Well, just a nod to the slides that you and Daniel just went through. We, as the Friends, see the revival of this site as a once-in-a-generation opportunity to tell a fuller and richer American story as we reclaim the legacy of John Jay. He has been called the forgotten founder, but lived here longer than Washington at Mount Vernon and Jefferson at Monticello. And we do really have an opportunity as a community, as a state, as a partnership nonprofit to be bringing wonderful stories to life, whether they're about Jay or the many people whose lives touched this site before Jay, after Jay, And we are really grateful to New York State for leading the charge on that front, and privileged to have the opportunity to be bringing so many topics to life. So as New York State leads the essential structural restoration of Bedford House and the interpretation of our whole history, the Friends have taken on the important complementary and in certain ways costly work of the interior finishing and furnishings, thanks in large part to the vision of our former presidents, Laura Harris and Heather Langham, and to the generosity of so many on the board and in this community. We have enlisted leading preservationists, among them Peter Kenny of the Met's American Wing, former advisor to the Richard Hampton Jenrette Foundation, to help us develop a furnishing plan and finishing plan grounded in deep historical research and respect for the home's federal era character. We think that this is an important way that as a Friends community, we can support New York State by being able to select individual objects and be part of a broader curatorial team. So we invite you into the front hall, which the main hall of the house really sets the architectural and emotional tone for the home. You'll see a newly commissioned floor cloth, which is inspired by 18th century British pattern, visually breaking up the long hallway, something Jay would have seen in other fine homes. That will be a reproduction. The wallpaper we had originally chosen, and what's illustrated here in this watercolor was something that the original research had led us to, until teams of our important New York State curators and project managers found this wallpaper remnant, which showed what the original paper was in the hall. And we were able to engage Adelphi Paper to reproduce this, and we will be mounting that in the main hall. Note also 2 early 19th century glass lanterns, once held by the Met, will illuminate the hall with period authenticity, and details like the repainted chairs and striped stair runner from Eaton Hill reinforced Jay's taste for what he called his elegant Republican simplicity. Next, we'll move to Jay's daughter Nancy's bedroom. Nancy lived here well until adulthood. She was in her teens when her mother, Sarah, also called Sally Jay, passed away just a year after the family moved in, and Nancy assumed the role of lady of the house. The space will give us a window into women's private lives in the early 19th century, not often looked at in our region, and especially those of an unmarried but prominent daughter of the house. We have been advised to be using refined yet modest textiles appropriate to a woman of Nancy's station, and with a palette and decor reflected in notes, primary documents, and similar homes of the time period to weave through what is represented here. We can move on next to the dining room, which is unique at Bedford House at the Homestead because it retains a nearly complete suite of original Jay family furniture. We've worked to preserve the sense of continuity while adding supporting elements that honor the federal style of the early 1800s, such as a plain green wallpaper with a narrow, you can see along the top, Otis federal chain border from Adelphi, chosen for both historical accuracy and elegance. This is a reproduction. And a new Wilton carpet adapted from an original embroidered wool carpet made in upstate New York. Layouts were informed by period guides. We can talk about those. Anybody who would like to follow up on the individual points, we are very excited about some of these pieces. Moving on to the parlor. This was an incredible find over the period of slowly taking down parts and pieces of the house, looking forward towards the restoration, where based on the direction of the floorboards, the state and our experts and consultants were able to determine that those two passageways, which were boarded up and closed, were actually open, and it was a magnificent double parlor. So the way that the room will be re-envisioned is as a large open space as it was in Jay's time. Both rooms will share a single watered silk wallpaper said by William Jay to have once adorned the house. It is also being faithfully reproduced by our partners Adelphi, and the border, which is called the Van Cortlandt border was chosen both for its period authenticity, but also a nod to Jay's maternal family. A Wilton medallion carpet in a classical design will stretch across both parlors. Window treatments in what red silk or wool are being crafted under the guidance of another person who's been helping us quite a bit, Clarissa DeMuzio, drawn French and British prints. And the room will blend original Jay pieces and carefully sourced acquisitions. This space really does capture some of the intricacies of life and entertainment and hosting in Jay's time. If we keep moving on, by restoring these rooms with care, with scholarship and integrity, we see that we're not just preserving a home, but creating a living space where generations, current, future, can connect personally to the values, the complexity, the civic ideals, and really have a feeling for catching a glimpse into our past and at the beauty and the stature that the site truly commands. And we hope that imagination will be inspired. Before I close, I wanted to briefly share how the Friends are approaching the next chapter of our stewardship and give everyone a glimpse into our priorities for 2025 and beyond. We are working hard alongside New York State to make sure that the House goes forward with this restoration plan and that we continue to provide support for the extras and niceties that will make it open with a pop. We are focused on advocacy, community engagement, and securing private support, and partnering with the state to ensure that future phases of capital plans, which we will dive into a little bit, our partners will, is shared in values with our community and with the integrity of the site. Our second big priority is keeping the homestead alive while it's closed. So we are delivering a robust calendar of off-site programs during the restoration. We've had an ongoing lecture series that we've benefited from Bedford Playhouse's hospitality, public events, educational initiatives planned for the 25 through 27 period. We'll touch on some funding, generous funding from the Ford Foundation, which has helped us bring that to life. And we are focused on expanding our outreach beyond our current audiences. Our third goal is making sure we have a strong financial future, both as a Friends group and as a site. So we continue to raise funds for Friends operations, capacity building, and we will be working alongside New York State for additional site restoration elements and inclusive public programming designed to keep these important anniversaries in mind and to life and centered around our amazing local site and national treasure. So if we move to the next slide, just a preview, we see that we are marching forward towards a parade of programming and partnerships from this 250th anniversary of the American Revolution, which Daniel referenced is really an 8-year period. It kicked off this year on April 18th with an event we hosted at Rochambeau Farm to commemorate the Midnight Ride of Paul Revere and the advent of the battles of Lexington and Concord. And we see this moving forward through 2027, which is the 200th anniversary of abolition in the state of New York. Both the Revolution and New York's abolition were important milestones in our country's history that John Jay had a critical, and his family, critical roles in, and which we believe the commemorative periods offer an opportunity to elevate the story of the homestead, allow for public engagement and learning and understanding even when the site is closed. And we are very much looking forward to a fall announcement of bringing our John Jay Debate Association to life, which is an initiative which we hope will engage our younger audiences in thinking through civil discourse, reasoning, fair judgment, and furthering an understanding of what ideals we were founded on and how we move forward in the best way. So it's been a real privilege to get to work with New York State on bringing some of these projects to life, and to the web of partners, some of whom are highlighted here, who are our home away from home while the site is closed. Moving on.
So just looking at a projected timeline for the next year and a half or so, our design team is actually working to finalize the design this summer in hopes that the project can start to go out to bid in the fall. So we're hoping to advertise in the fall, and during that time, we have what's called a quiet period, in which New York State bidding procedures require us to essentially not be able to answer questions, so as not to interfere with the procurement. And then a contract hopefully will be in place toward the end of 2025, early 26, in which time mobilization and the start of construction can begin. We're hoping that the construction will be complete sometime around the fall of 2027, and shortly thereafter, the site will be able to be reopened to the public. Probably several months following that, the Bedford House will be able to be reopened. That will take some additional time for cleaning, collections, installation, and staff training. As Heather has mentioned, we're adding so many spaces to the tour, so they're having to design an entirely new tour. So staff will have to be trained on that as well. And Linda.
Thanks. Thanks, Amanda, for delivering a great presentation. Daniel, Heather, and Caroline, for all that you've given us this evening. And thanks to all of you for joining us this evening. And we appreciate your interest in learning about the plans for the restoration of Bedford House. We are honored and really pleased to be able to keep this site relevant in today's times and into the future. I think, as Caroline mentioned, it's just important. The work that John Jay did is an underpinning to a lot of the law, the diplomacy, and freedoms that we take for granted, and perhaps people should understand those underpinnings. So calling attention to his life through the physical assets on this site, as well as the stories of people who've lived on the land, at the home, who were involved with John Jay himself, but his family, those who worked for him, and anything, and the members of his family, and the things that sort of informed the actions that he took during his tenure, are all sort of to be reflected in this site. And we appreciate want to take a moment to say that we appreciate your input and the input of the partnerships of those who help us keep the site so beautiful, such as the several garden clubs and the Herb Society and others who volunteer on the site. And I really feel it's important to acknowledge and thank the critical partnership of the Friends of the John Jay Homestead on this project, and also many others that are involved on the site. It's a long-standing partnership for which we are grateful. Thank you, Caroline and the Friends. So we've had many questions that were submitted during registration that were answered in the presentation, and many that were not necessarily covered in the presentation that we'd like to try to answer now. So Daniel, you want to pick up wetland impacts?
Okay. The project element that comes closest to wetlands is the ditching of the electrical service from J Street to Bedford House. The primary wetlands are on the east side of the site, and that wetland boundary comes close to Farm Road. There is approximately 200 feet between Farm Road and the primary access road. It has not yet been decided on which side of the primary access road the electrical will be installed. Regardless, there will be about 200 feet of mowed grass and at least one road between the work and those wetlands. The contractor will install erosion and sediment control as needed to prevent loose soil from leaving the work area or reaching any sensitive areas. There are some potential wetlands and water bodies on the west side of the property. Once again, there is a sizable amount of mowed grass between the ditch work and the potential wetlands. Stormwater will have ample opportunity to infiltrate prior to reaching any wetlands or water bodies. Again, the contractor will install erosion and sediment control as needed. At the Bedford House, there will be no significant change in impervious surfaces and no change to stormwater infrastructure. A new under drain will be installed around the foundation, and that drain will discharge southwest of the house into an area of mowed grass. There are no known wetlands in the immediate vicinity of that discharge. That discharge will solely be groundwater. As such, it will not contain any sediment. This large location will provide separation between the discharge and any sensitive areas. Discharge will infiltrate away from the foundation. Energy from the discharge will be dissipated through the design of the infrastructure, which will minimize the potential for scour. Wetland permits from New York State DEC will be obtained as needed. All permit conditions will be followed. No significant potential impacts to wetlands have been identified.
Moving on to noise and light impacts. I know there was some concern about noise during construction. Our typical working hours for construction are limited to 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. We will follow the Town of Bedford's ordinance not permitting work with high volume levels prior to 8 a.m. or after 6 p.m. The majority of construction, as we've talked about tonight, will happen in and around Bedford House, with some trenching happening for the new 3-phase construction. And that's something that we will work with the contractor to make sure that that is done during specific hours. Once construction is complete, the uses on site will remain largely consistent with what they have been before, prior to the site being closed. In terms of light impacts, the project will be using some minor dark sky compliant light bollards along the new pathway around Bedford House. There's only, I think, 3 fixtures. You can see here, dark sky compliant really just regulates lighting and prevents the light from going upward, affecting wildlife, people, energy, reducing carbon footprint, and obviously preserving the aesthetic of the night sky. We are proposing 1 vehicle parking bollard. It's limited to 12 feet in height, which is actually rather short for a parking bollard, out on the east side of Bedford House, where we are hoping to add some ADA parking. There will also be some limited facade wash lighting along the Island wing of Bedford House that will be capped at the roof eave.
There's a question about our budget. It's about $30 million with an additional $1 million coming in through the Friends of John J. Homestead with their historic finishes and furniture that you saw the beautiful images that Caroline showed.
We have received a number of questions about possible future site enhancements. We've compiled a list of some of the ones that we've been discussing. We have the Carriage Barn, which is our visitor center. It's currently a seasonal building. We would like to ultimately make that a year-round visitor center and have full accessibility. Also, the Red Barn, which is our most popular discovery center. We would like to see that year-round with full accessibility. The Brick Cottage is probably the second most important historic structure on this property. It was constructed under John Jay's watchful eye to house his farm manager. We think that this could serve as a possible archival center with some exhibits, public meeting space, and also some possible office space. Overall, we would love to see improved accessibility site-wide that would include within our gardens and our picnic areas. We would like to activate the farm lane as our primary entrance onto the property. That is the only historic entrance that exists today. And we do acknowledge that we will need increased parking. Our current lot serves about 16 vehicles. There are a number of other existing historic buildings on the property that are in dire need of restoration. We have the prefabricated cottage, which is a small white wooden structure closest to the ice pond. The Coachman's House, which is currently occupied by Friends of John J. Homestead. We have our cow barn, which is where our chicken cooperative is located in the winter months. Our schoolhouse and playhouse to the north of Bedford House up on the hill. We have our potting shed, which you can see in this image here. as well as our laundry building, which houses our public restrooms. We do need improved maintenance facilities, and we would also like to see garden enhancements, including the repair of the historic fountain. We have received some additional questions related to a location for additional parking and whether or not we have any plans for new buildings. We are hoping to begin work on a comprehensive plan soon. Those items, as well as the items listed on this slide, would all be addressed during that process.
Caroline, I think you're going to talk about the farm market location.
Yes, so just to reemphasize that the site is currently open for passive recreation, but closed for everything beyond that. So the farmers market, which is in our 15th year, is moved to the to one of the train station parking lots in Katona between the Coldwell Banker and the Katona Frame Shop, for those familiar with town. But we've been graciously received by Ellen Calvis in the Town of Bedford and the Katona Chamber of Commerce. And after launching on May 3rd, have had a few wonderful weekends of great patronage of all of our historic and even some new vendors. So I encourage those of you who have accidentally stopped by the Homestead or who haven't yet had the chance to come visit in town to come through. Those are every Saturday through October from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. So thank you to everyone for accommodating this, and a kind of another way we are trying to keep the homestead alive while the site is closed. Good.
All right, so we had, again, a lot of pre-submitted questions that we, aspirationally, we hope we gave you the answers that you were seeking in our presentation. So we've got the indicated slide where we spoke about that. Should you later go back to our video and be curious where your question was answered, this correlating slide. We had a couple later questions come in with our registration, and so I'm going to move this first one over. Will there be any changes to the Carriage Barn Visitor Center? To Heather.
Paige. So at this time, the Carriage Barn will remain a seasonal building. That is our visitor center during the months May through October. And noted on slide 32, it is on our list of possible future projects to become a year-round space. In the meantime, new exhibits are planned for the visitor center, which will include information on the J family acquisition of formerly indigenous lands, enslaved and free Black people owned by or laboring for the J family, the J family's relationship to slavery and later abolition, tenant farmers working on J-owned land, expanded stories of the women of the J family, as well as information about John Jay, his life, his accomplishments, and his legacy.
Thanks, Heather. We've got another question following this. What are the plans for the gardens, as well as will access to the gardens continue to be available on site?
Yes, so gardens that are disrupted during construction, which will specifically be the terrace garden tended by Rusticus Garden Club and the North Courtyard Garden tended by Hop Ground Garden Club, will see restoration work and some improvements. For example, new plantings are planned for the foundation beds along the Island Wing that will be disturbed by a new ADA path going to the glass porch, and a new garden is planned for the North Courtyard that will be disrupted while waterproofing Bedford House's foundation. Plans for these two gardens have been created with the garden clubs and with our landscape design team. There are no improvements in other gardens as part of this construction contract, but we are hoping to see some improvements proceed outside of the construction contract. So those are conversations that Friends of John Jay Homestead and I plan to have with respective garden clubs and other stakeholders later this year.
All right, our next question. Why hasn't the work begun? I will send over to Daniel McKay.
We ask ourselves that question too. We're eager to see the investments go forward at this site. And we know the site has been closed, that the house has been closed for an extended period of time, dating back to the installation of a comprehensive fire suppression system that the Friends also were a key party in providing initial funding for that. So this site has been closed for several years, the house itself, rather. We are eager to see it reopened. We are going through the final scoping and design to get to the bidding, the design of the bidding process. And I really think while we were at a similar point a year ago, I think the delay is one, and this last year is one that has realistically acknowledged the increased cost of construction, the ambition of the design 2 years ago, and I'm actually quite thankful that we are not in the midst of trying to afford that design in this day and age, this year. So I think we have a realistic scope for the money we have available for this project, and we're going to have a spectacular result when the project's complete. So the finalizing of the bid documents comes next. This project will go out to bid in the fall. The bid will be awarded and construction will begin as an earlier slide depicted in winter 2026.
Thanks. Next question's also for you. Why were new roads and structures prioritized over the restoration and winterization of other historic buildings on site?
Yeah, so this question is a bit of a look back to the scope of the project, the scoping of the project that was undertaken last year. There are several documents that have been informing all of the work, all of the scoping and planning work that's occurred in the last 24 plus months, including a really impressive historic landscape design plan that the Friends had the key role in funding and securing the services of Patricia O'Donnell. She's an internationally recognized landscape architect who took a comprehensive look at the 62 acres and really provided some initial impressions of what the opportunities were on site for both new opportunities as well as landscape restoration. So the scope of the plan last year, one we are no longer committed to, was one that included investments in multiple nodes, acknowledged that the capital investments in several structures was going to lead to increased visitation, likely required the need for new parking capacity, such as that. And we have backed away from those plans out of a caution and concern for what the state can afford. And I would say we have always been cognizant of the need, our obligation to meet the stewardship and to meet reinvestment across the full 62 acres here. And that is not only the buildings themselves, but that's invasive species management. That's all sorts of factors going into maintaining a heritage landscape such as this. I think it's good that we have a sense of scope, a sense of priority at this point in time, that we have a strong sense of what we might do next. But at this point, and we know that infrastructure infrastructure improvements are going to have to happen side by side as additional investments occur at this site. So it's a balance. It's a balance at every point in the design process. And I don't think we were prioritizing infrastructure over historic structures in the last phase. And I know we're not doing it in this phase.
Thanks, Daniel. One more while you're on screen. How will you appropriately preserve formerly indigenous land at the site?
I think there's several layers to the response to this. One is it's going to be raised up with the Our Whole History initiative as a focal point for interpretation on site. And Heather has already acknowledged that in her earlier remarks, that the Indigenous history will very specifically be reflected in the new exhibits going into the orientation space and the carriage barn. And I think that's a critical first step. That is material that is, in a sense, missing from the exhibits that were in place when the site closed, when the carriage house closed to visitation last year. This is a very intensely studied site from an archaeological perspective. We have subsequent investments and projects over several decades at the site have left us with a very detailed history about the archaeological findings, both related to the Jays family present as well as earlier presence of Indigenous people on site. We know where the sensitive areas are. And we know to avoid them, which I think is just as much a critical piece of preserving Indigenous history as extolling it through interpretive initiatives. So I think the site is going to be better prepared to acknowledge and interpret Indigenous history, as well as protect Indigenous history through should any subsequent construction, particularly new construction, occur on site. We have an archaeological sensitivity, a sensitivity understanding to the site that is going to fundamentally inform any decision of that scope.
Thanks, Daniel. I'm going to kick it back over to Heather about another question we got later on in registration regarding the return of the chicken co-op.
We would love to see the ladies come back here as soon as construction has completely wrapped and it's safe. We'd absolutely be thrilled to host.
Thanks, Heather. All right, I believe that brings us to now questions submitted in tonight's Q&A box, which again, you can find the box to submit your questions in the lower right-hand corner. These first two we received, I'm going to hand over to Amanda, the first of which is regarding proposed site plan available to be shown tonight, or generally other images we have of areas of impact for our current scoped project.
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question.
The first question is, do you have a proposed site plan to show tonight? And then
we don't, but really the limits of the site plan is to do the improvements to the electrical, the three-phase electrical, and everything else will really just be in and around the Bedford house. So adding a path, improving the path around Bedford house to make it accessible to the ballroom and the new mechanical lift. But aside from that, the changes will really just be limited to Bedford house. There really are not any site improvements.
Amanda, slides 10 and 11 might be worth returning to just for a quick illustration.
Is this slide 10 and 11?
15 will do, yes.
Okay, sorry. So again, the new three-phase electrical. So this will be trench dug, buried electrical. So that will be an improvement. The new path around Bedford house, there is an existing path that goes there. We will be removing that and resetting it in the bluestone and concrete pavers so that there's no variable grade there. We are hoping to make some improvements to this existing driveway area to allow for 1 to 2 accessible parking spaces. And then the rear courtyard behind Bedford house will be disturbed to be able to access the below grade walls for improved drainage there. We're having some major water infiltration into the basement, so that will be disturbed. Aside from that, everything as you see it will remain.
Right. Relating again to interior work, will the weatherization work on the building include new insulation in walls, new windows to be installed, or restoration of existing only? Second question.
The first question, we are not proposing to add any additional insulation to the building. We are hoping to minimize the amount of disruption to the historic fabric as possible. And also we know that historic buildings, they're built in a way that buildings today aren't built. So while it would help for energy efficiency in order to maintain and protect this building ongoing, we are not proposing any additional insulation. As far as window restoration or improvements go, we are looking to preserve as many of the historic windows as possible. There are some instances where we will have to do some replacements, specifically in the attic or the third floor level, just because those windows are really kind of beyond repair at this point. But for the most part, we are looking at window restoration as opposed to replacement, and we are really focusing on providing extra security through the storm windows, so making sure that those are all buttoned up as well.
Thanks, Amanda. Then I'm going to kick it back to Heather for another question about garden access.
So as Caroline mentioned, the site is open for passive recreation until construction begins, and that will continue to be the case. Once we start construction, the site will be closed to the general public for safety and security. Garden club volunteers will continue to have access to their gardens during construction on a predetermined schedule.
Thank you. And then it looks like the last outstanding question I see in our Q&A chat box concerns breaking out the budget between funding spent on hard costs such as construction versus softer costs such as engineering, architecture, staff time. Did I direct that to Daniel or Linda, I believe?
I would actually perhaps invoke Garrett if he's willing. That $30 million figure certainly includes hard costs. To the extent it includes soft costs, it probably does not include all soft costs, because there's certainly costs being borne by the Bureau of Historic Sites and Division that are probably not reflected there. But Garrett, do you want to comment?
Yeah, I think we have Amanda, do you have that breakdown of kind of the general costs?
We do not have a graphic of that, no.
Do you remember the numbers? I mean, I know all that the all-in is, we're assuming we're going to be spending about $30 million. The construction budget, I mean, the construction contract budget is somewhere between 14 and 15 million, if my memory serves me correct.
That's correct.
I think we have design around 5 million.
That's correct.
Okay. Can you help me with the remaining numbers? Like, we have to have money. I mean, we have to have money available for bids that may come in on the higher side. We also have to make sure that we have enough money for any change orders or any changes that occur during construction that would cause us to have additional costs, especially when we have a project with this high budget, that we have to make sure we have enough money and funding available that we can finish the project. So
that's correct.
And
the one outstanding, sorry, Garrett, I mean,
no, that's okay.
But the one outstanding item is we do have an active contract with the construction management firm who will oversee construction for $5 million.
Okay, so there's 5 for construction management. That's a budget. Then 5 million for design. That's a budget. 14 to 15 million plus minus. I mean, that's still in development for the construction contract. And then we also, like I said, we have to have funding available also in case the engineer's estimate, if it comes in on the higher side and not the lower side, that we have enough funding available to progress with the procurement.
Garrett, thank you.
Yeah.
handle it. Sure.
All right, another question in the Q&A box. I will send Heather's way. The commenter writes, I walked the site yesterday. Why aren't the grounds being kept up now? Also, there are many trees that line the project. Is there a plan to clean up the 64 acres?
So my staff has been hard at work just generally with the upkeep of the property. We have, because we're open only for passive recreation, been mowing somewhat less frequently than we had been, mostly to conserve energy, reduce carbon footprint, and also man hours. We always manage hazardous trees. They are dealt with as they are identified. There is some minor tree work directly around Bedford House that is included in this project. But other than that, we mostly are maintaining the property as we have always.
Thanks, Heather. All right, that I believe, unless any of my colleagues see a question I inadvertently overlooked, looks to be the sum of questions currently in our Q&A box. I'll pause for a moment. If anyone online has questions they're actively typing out, I don't want to cut you off. But I don't know, Heather or Caroline, if there are any events coming up that you want to promote while we've got a nice audience online. But if not, I will kick it over to Daniel, perhaps to wrap us up for the evening. And just thanking all my colleagues that have answered questions. And I put in a significant amount of work into this presentation, particularly Amanda Tucker, project manager, has done an extraordinary job on this effort. But Daniel, I will hand the mic over.
Paige, thank you. I hope this presentation has been informative. We are certainly happy to engage with questions that may come in either directly or through the friends, Friends of John J. Homestead as well. This is going to be an impactful project, perhaps long in the making, but an impactful project nonetheless. And we look forward to showing both the residents of Katona and Bedford just what a gem we have here, a gem that deserves this level of investment, and has unfortunately not received it until to date. So we look forward to being partners with you in this project. We know it's been a long wait for what this for the renewal and reintroduction of the site, but we are making great progress, and would appreciate all the support you can bring, all the questions you may have. We're happy to address, and I thank you for your time this evening to consider what the state and partners are undertaking here. It's going to be impressive. So thank you.
I would just like to add, if anybody has any questions that they think of, after they've slept on this information, as I often do, please feel free to send them to the email address that's listed on the screen, parksplanning.info@parks.newyork.gov.
All right, thank you for your time, everyone. I believe this concludes our formal presentation and Q&A session. Greatly appreciate your time. And again, thank you to Caroline McGill and the Friends for supporting us in tonight's meeting and all the work you do on our site.